was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime, a dream safari through the breathtaking wilderness of Zambia's Kafue National Park, where the air hums with bird calls and the landscape stretches wide under the African sun. Among the group of tourists was Gail Matson, a 79-year-old woman from Minnesota with a deep love for travel and wildlife. For her, this wasn't just another trip. It was a bucket list moment, a chance to experience elephants in their natural habitat, not behind glass or fences. But what was supposed to be awe-inspiring quickly turned tragic. During a game drive, the group encountered a large bull elephant, and while safari-goers are used to such close encounters, something about this one felt different. The elephant appeared agitated, its movements more deliberate, its posture more tense. Before the driver could reverse or navigate away, blocked by thick brush on both sides, the elephant suddenly charged. The massive animal stormed the vehicle, using its tusks and sheer strength to flip it over like a toy truck. In the chaos that followed, Gail was fatally injured, while 5 others sustained injuries. The footage captured moments before the impact, circulating widely on YouTube and news platforms, shows the elephant approaching steadily as a passenger nervously films the escalating situation. The guide, unable to escape due to terrain and vegetation, had no choice but to shout and brace. The video cuts out before the moment of impact, but the damage was all too real. Park authorities later confirmed the elephant had not shown prior aggressive behavior, calling the attack sudden and unpredictable. The incident ignited global debate about the balance between ecotourism and wildlife safety. While these safaris offer a profound connection to nature, they also carry risks that sometimes, tragically, cannot be controlled. Experts weighed in, noting that elephants, especially lone bulls, can be unpredictable, particularly during musth, a period of heightened testosterone that can fuel aggression. While it is not confirmed if this elephant was in musth, the behavior was erratic and forceful enough to cause alarm. The incident was not just a freak accident. It became a painful reminder that wildlife, no matter how majestic or calm they may seem, are still wild. Friends and family of Gail Matson described her as adventurous, compassionate, and endlessly curious about the world. Her death sparked mourning in her hometown, as well as reflections across the safari tourism industry. It also raised tough questions about whether the guides were properly trained, whether the vehicle was appropriately equipped, and whether park safety protocols were enough. In response, tour operators began reassessing driving routes, guide training, and emergency response tactics. Even veteran rangers acknowledged that nothing in years of experience could always prepare you for a bull elephant with a grudge and a clear path to charge. Yet, amid the sorrow and shock, some found inspiration in Gail's legacy. Her family shared that she would not want fear to stop others from experiencing the world's natural wonders, but she would want everyone to do it smartly, with caution and respect. It is a poignant reminder that the same force of nature we travel so far to admire deserves both our admiration and our understanding. Because when you are in the wild, you are not just a tourist with a camera, you are a guest in someone else's territory. And sometimes the host makes it very clear who is in charge. Sean Cole was just 26 when he made the fatal decision to take a swim that would cost him his life. A tech professional living in Darwin, Australia, Sean was invited to a friend's 30th birthday celebration being held at the Mary River Wilderness Retreat, an off-the-grid getaway nestled between Darwin and the edges of Kakadu National Park. With lush landscapes and a rugged charm, the retreat was popular with tourists and locals alike. But its beauty masked a deadly truth. The nearby Mary River is home to one of the densest populations of saltwater crocodiles in the world. Despite this danger, Sean and about 15 others were having a good time, unwinding and celebrating in the Australian outback. On Saturday afternoon, fueled by either adrenaline or alcohol, or maybe both, Sean and another friend decided they were going to swim across the river. Their plan proved they could do it. Signs warning about crocodiles were clearly posted along the riverbank, and staff at the retreat had even warned the group to stay out of the water, but those warnings went ignored. Sean wasn't the first to test the river, and others before had made it across unscathed. But what he didn't know was that just weeks earlier, researchers had conducted a survey at the exact same spot. It revealed 4 crocodiles over 13 feet in length and a dozen more over 10 feet. In short, this was one of the most dangerous places in the world to swim. With their friends cheering them on from the bank and a nearby boat observing from upstream, Sean and his companion jumped in, The river stretched about 180 meters across, and as they kicked their way to the far bank, it looked like their luck might hold. Both men made it safely to the other side, grinning at each other with the thrill of the moment. But then they turned around and began swimming back, and that's when everything went wrong. As the two men began the return journey, the people in the boat noticed something, another shape trailing behind them in the water. At first, it looked like a third swimmer, but as the sun reflected off the river's surface, it became terrifyingly clear. This was no person. It was the massive, ridged head of a crocodile, bearing down on the swimmers fast. Sean and his friend had no idea the predator was behind them, until their friends began shouting from the riverbank. At first, Sean thought they were joking, but when he saw panic in their faces, he looked back and saw it. Just a few feet away, the enormous crocodile lunged. Before he could react, it struck, sinking its crushing jaws around his chest and dragging him beneath the surface in a brutal death roll. His friend could only watch in horror as the water exploded in thrashing limbs and foam, and then fell still. The river returned to silence. Sean was gone. Emergency services arrived and began a massive search effort. Days passed. Then, tragically, Sean's lifeless body surfaced about 200 meters from where the attack had happened. Nearby, a 15-foot crocodile was found lurking and was shot along with 3 others. Authorities couldn't confirm if it was the exact animal responsible, but it brought some sense of closure to Sean's devastated family. Sean was remembered as the careful one, the last person anyone expected to take such a risk. But in the wilds of Australia, even one mistake can turn fatal. And for Sean Cole, that single swim ended in his terrifying final affliction. In April 2014, 2 Dutch students, 21-year-old Chris Kramers and 22-year-old Lisanne Froon, embarked on what was meant to be the trip of a lifetime. Bright, adventurous, and full of hope, the young women had traveled to Panama with plans to volunteer, explore the culture, and enjoy the breathtaking landscapes. After arriving in the town of Boquete, known for its lush mountains and popular hiking trails, the two seemed to be adjusting well. But on April 1st, things took a tragic turn. That morning, they set off on a hike along the El Pianista Trail, a route that starts off easy and scenic, but can quickly become treacherous the deeper one goes into the jungle. They were never seen alive again. Initially, their absence didn't trigger much concern. It wasn't uncommon for travelers to go off-grid for a day or two. However, when they failed to meet a local guide for a planned tour the next day, alarm bells began to ring. Within days, a search operation was underway involving local police, dogs, helicopters, and even Dutch authorities who flew in to assist. Despite extensive efforts, no trace of the girls was found. It wasn't until 10 weeks later that a breakthrough came, but it only deepened the mystery. A local woman found a backpack near a riverbank. Inside were some strange clues: both Lisanne's and Chris's phones, a camera, sunglasses, a water bottle, and 2 bras, all surprisingly well preserved despite the wet environment. The phone data was chilling. The women had attempted to call emergency services 112, Dutch, and 911, Panamanian, starting just hours after they left for the hike. Multiple attempts were made over several days, but there was no signal. The final successful interaction with a phone was April 11th, 10 days after their disappearance. After that, the phones stopped working altogether. As investigators reviewed the camera's memory card, things got even stranger. There were over 90 photos taken after the time they were believed to be lost. Many of them were snapped at night, showing nothing but darkness or vague images of jungle foliage, tree branches, and rocks. A few showed what appeared to be one of the girls' belongings laid out on a rock, possibly as a signal or distress message. One haunting photo showed the back of Chris's head, with what some interpret as blood or injury, though this remains speculative. Soon after, more personal items and human remains were discovered. A fragment of Lisanne's foot, still in her boot, and parts of a pelvis were found near the river. Even more unsettling was the discovery of Chris's denim shorts, found neatly folded atop a rock far from the backpack. The conditions of the remains raised questions. Some bones were bleached unnaturally white with no soft tissue left, while others appeared relatively fresh. Autopsies were inconclusive. Authorities ruled out foul play, suggesting that the girls may have slipped and fallen, possibly trying to cross the river or escape deeper into the jungle. However, critics questioned this theory, pointing out inconsistencies such as the odd state of the belongings, the phone activity timeline, and the strange sequence of photos. To this day, the case remains unresolved. The deaths were ruled accidental by Panamanian officials, but many believe the full story has never been told. The disappearance of Chris and Lisanne continues to fascinate and disturb, a stark reminder of how quickly an adventure can turn into a nightmare, and how nature, no matter how beautiful, holds secrets that may never be uncovered. In the quiet midday heat of August 28, 2022, a tragic and baffling event unfolded at the Accra Zoo in Ghana. It wasn't a typical Sunday at the zoo with giggling children, wide-eyed visitors feeding goats, or tourists marveling at the rare white lion cubs. Instead, it became the scene of a fatal encounter between man and beast, one that left more questions than answers. A middle-aged man, whose identity was never officially released, somehow managed to breach not just one, but 2 levels of security, scaling a 10-foot outer fence and then a 20-foot inner wall to get inside the lion enclosure. Why he did it is still a matter of speculation. Some believe he intended to steal the prized white lion cubs, which are extremely rare and valuable on the black market. Others suggest it may have been a dare, a delusion, or even a misguided attempt at a spiritual ritual. Regardless of the motive, one thing is clear. Once he stepped into that enclosure, he stepped far outside the boundaries of safety, both physical and natural. Inside were not just any lions, but a protective lion family, and the male, Melvin, was not having any unexpected visitors that day. Lions are territorial by nature, and even more so when protecting their young. Within moments of the intrusion, the man was attacked. Witnesses reported hearing roaring and commotion before zoo staff rushed to the scene. The aftermath was gruesome, with officials later recovering the man's lifeless body from the enclosure and confirming he had died from severe injuries sustained during the mauling. What shocked many wasn't just the attack itself, but the sheer recklessness of the act. Zoos are designed with multiple layers of security, not just to protect animals from humans, but more importantly, humans from animals. Melvin and his pride didn't escape or break out of their space. They were in their home, doing exactly what nature wired them to do. The Ghana Forestry Commission acted quickly to close the zoo and launch a full investigation, confirming that all animals were secure and that no staff had been at fault. The statement they released also highlighted the need for the public to respect zoo boundaries, reminding people that enclosures are not just walls, but lifelines designed to preserve life on both sides. The tragic incident sparked international headlines and online debate, with many asking how such a security breach was even possible, and whether additional safeguards should be implemented. It also brought renewed attention to the risks faced by both humans and animals when curiosity or poor judgment crosses the line into danger. Melvin the lion didn't choose this. He wasn't a rogue animal or an aggressive beast on the loose. He was simply a protective father responding to a sudden and confusing threat in his space in front of his mate and cubs. Unfortunately, the consequences were fatal for the trespasser and deeply unsettling for the zookeepers and wildlife community who work daily to keep both animals and humans safe. In a way, this incident serves as a grim but important reminder that wild animals, no matter how used to captivity they may seem, still operate by the rules of the wild. There are boundaries for a reason, and when those boundaries are ignored, disrespected, or foolishly crossed, tragedy is often not far behind. The Accra Zoo has since reviewed its protocols, and while the animals remain unharmed, the emotional toll on staff and the public remains very real. Melvin, meanwhile, is still in his enclosure, still a lion, still a father, and still a creature of instinct. Unchanged by the headlines, but forever marked by the day a stranger dared to enter his world. Just outside of Paris, there's a wildlife park called Thoiry, and it's not your typical European zoo. This place goes all out to recreate the full safari experience, offering guided tours in rugged jeeps, luxury chalets with panoramic windows, and even transparent tunnels that let you look predators like lions and leopards right in the eye. But while the park does a lot to keep guests and animals safe, that safety comes with one major condition. You have to follow the rules. Now, this terrifying story centers on a woman we'll call Marie, a 37-year-old who visited the park in late June 2024 with her toddler and her mother. They spent the day exploring the safe areas, sticking to the enclosed tunnels, and enjoying the sights. Marie's little boy loved the reptile house most of all. That night, the family stayed in one of the park's deluxe chalets, which happened to be located inside a zone called the American Exhibit, a massive open forest area modeled after North American wilderness, home to animals like wolves, bears, and lynxes. Here's the catch. That part of the park isn't open for walking. Visitors are supposed to travel only by armored jeeps with a guide, and even chalet guests have guards patrolling around them 24/7. But for reasons we may never fully understand, Marie made a fatal choice the next morning. After waking up and seeing wolves from the safety of her window, she decided to go for a jog. That's right, a jog, through an active predator zone. She left her son with her mother and set off down a path. The wide road eventually narrowed into a trail, clearly marked with multiple warning signs that only trained staff were allowed beyond that point. Whether she didn't see the signs or simply ignored them, Marie kept jogging, headphones in, totally unaware that danger was watching her from both sides. She was so focused that she nearly ran straight into a massive bear. Frozen in shock, she slowly began to back away, only to be ambushed from behind by something far worse. An Arctic wolf lunged at her ankle, trying to yank her down. She screamed and fought back, but seconds later, two more wolves, a male and a juvenile, leapt from the trees and joined in the attack. The male wolf lunged onto her back. The young one tore at her arm. The first attacker had dislocated her ankle and nearly ripped her foot clean off, but it was the male, clamping down on her throat, who would do the most damage. Luckily, two rangers nearby heard her screams and rushed in, scaring the wolves away just in time. Marie was alive, but barely. Covered in blood, unconscious, and barely breathing, she was rushed to emergency care. Doctors fought to save her, even managing to reattach her foot and stabilize her condition. But after several days in a coma, a severe infection in her leg led to her tragic death just a week later. Now here's where things get messy. Marie's family is suing the zoo, claiming there weren't enough warnings. The zoo insists there were at least 7 signs, but Marie's legal team argues that the signs were small, poorly placed, and lacked obvious danger symbols. In 2013, the tragic death of Elisa Lam at Los Angeles' infamous Cecil Hotel captured global attention and became one of the most disturbing and mysterious cases involving a tourist. Elisa was a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Canada, traveling alone through California. Intelligent, thoughtful, and active online, she documented much of her trip through blog posts and social media updates. On January 26th, she checked into the Cecil Hotel, an aging building in downtown LA with a notoriously dark past that included links to suicides, murders, and even serial killers. Elisa likely chose it for affordability, not knowing it would become the center of a mystery that would baffle investigators and haunt the internet for years. By February 1st, Elisa's family, who she had been calling daily, stopped hearing from her. Concerned, they reported her missing. The Los Angeles police department searched the hotel but initially found no sign of her. With no leads, they released a piece of elevator surveillance footage that became the most famous and disturbing aspect of the case. In the video, Elisa enters the elevator and begins pressing multiple buttons. Her behavior appears erratic as she peeks outside as if she's being followed, moves strangely, hides in the corner, and gestures in ways that many found unsettling. The elevator doors remain open far longer than normal, adding to the eerie nature of the footage. The video quickly went viral, sparking endless speculation. Some believed she was having a mental health episode. Others thought she was being stalked. Some viewers even suspected something supernatural at play. Internet users dissected every frame, generating theories that ranged from logical to bizarre. Some believed she was under the influence of drugs, although toxicology later ruled that out. Others thought she was interacting with someone just outside the camera's view. A few connected her behavior to urban legends, such as the so-called elevator game, which supposedly transports players to another realm. The case took a horrifying turn on February 19th, when guests at the hotel began complaining of low water pressure and strange-tasting water. Maintenance staff went to check the rooftop water tanks. Inside one of them, they made a gruesome discovery. Elisa's naked body was floating in the tank with her clothes and belongings nearby. The tanks were large, heavy, and difficult to access, situated on the roof behind locked and alarmed doors. Somehow, Elisa had gotten inside. The official cause of death was listed as accidental drowning. The autopsy revealed no signs of physical trauma or sexual assault, and toxicology tests showed only her prescribed medication for bipolar disorder. Investigators suggested she may have experienced a mental health crisis that led her to climb into the tank voluntarily. However, many found this explanation unsatisfying. The hotel's poor security, the strange elevator footage, and the difficulty in reaching the tank made the conclusion feel incomplete to some. The case fueled a wave of conspiracy theories. Some were based on real coincidences, like a tuberculosis outbreak in the area being tested with a kit named Lam Elisa. Others were more sensational, involving foul play or paranormal influences. Though none of these were proven, they helped cement Elisa Lam's story as an internet obsession and modern urban legend. Her death also reignited public interest in the Cecil Hotel, which had long been associated with tragedy and crime. The hotel closed for renovations shortly after and remains a symbol of the darker side of urban history. Elisa's story was later explored in Netflix's 2021 documentary Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, where experts, internet users, and investigators tried to piece together what really happened. Though the official narrative points to a tragic accident linked to mental health, the case continues to raise uncomfortable questions and remains deeply unsettling to this day. In January 2017, a tragic and widely publicized incident unfolded at the Yungar Wildlife Park, more commonly known as Ningbo Zoo, in China's Zhejiang province. A middle-aged man, later identified as Mr. Zhang, attempted to bypass the zoo's entrance fee by scaling a 3-meter wall with the intention of sneaking into the park. What began as a misguided effort to save money quickly turned into a horrifying and fatal mistake. After climbing over the first wall and slipping past further barriers, Zhang ended up inside the tiger enclosure, home to several adult Bengal tigers. Within moments of entering, he was spotted by the animals who, confused and curious, approached him. At first, onlookers and his own family, who had entered the park legally and were completely unaware of his plan, watched in shock as the tigers surrounded him. The situation escalated rapidly as one tiger lunged, clamping down on Zhang's neck and dragging him across the enclosure. Zoo staff responded with urgency, attempting to scare the animals away using firecrackers and water hoses, but the tiger refused to release its grip. In front of stunned visitors, including Zhang's wife and children, the attack continued until police were called in, and one of the tigers was shot and killed in an effort to rescue him. Zhang was eventually retrieved and rushed to a nearby hospital, but the injuries were far too severe and he was pronounced dead shortly after. The story made headlines across China and beyond, prompting an outpouring of public reaction that ranged from sorrow to outrage. Many criticized the zoo for what they saw as inadequate security, claiming the outer wall was too easy to scale. Others condemned Zhang's recklessness, pointing out that signs had been clearly posted warning of the dangers and marking the area as a restricted zone. Online discussions reflected a broader debate, with some mourning the loss of human life, while others were deeply saddened by the death of the tiger, which had only acted on instinct within its territory. The incident also revived memories of similar attacks, including the notorious Battling Wildlife World incident just a year prior, where a woman was mauled after stepping out of her vehicle inside a tiger safari zone. In both cases, a combination of human error and underestimation of animal behavior had led to devastating consequences. Zhang's story stands as a somber reminder that wild animals, even those kept in enclosures, are not and will never be tame. A tiger's instinct is to investigate, stalk, and if provoked or simply confused, strike. These animals are not villains. They are apex predators responding to unfamiliar stimuli in their domain. While zoos can and should uphold the highest safety standards, the responsibility also lies with visitors to respect boundaries, both literal and ethical. In the end, a father's decision to cut corners cost him his life, traumatized his family, and resulted in the unnecessary death of a captive tiger. No amount of cost saving was worth the price that was ultimately paid. The Ningbo Zoo incident continues to be cited in safety discussions, animal rights debates, and risk management courses, not just as a news story, but as a haunting case study of what can happen when caution is ignored and nature is underestimated. Our next story is a chilling mystery that took place off the coast of Mexico in December 2023. 3 people were attacked in the span of just 2 weeks. But here's the twist. No one is 100% sure what creature was responsible. It started with 26-year-old Maria Jimenez. She was enjoying a swim with friends and family when she was suddenly attacked and killed in the water. Witnesses confirmed it was a shark, but the species couldn't be identified. Just a few days later, less than half a kilometer away, 2 more people were attacked near the resort town of Zihuatanejo. Naturally, most people assumed the same shark was behind all 3 incidents, but the truth might be far stranger than anyone expected. The first of those 2 new attacks happened when a young woman was wading in the shallows. One minute she was relaxing, then, in a flash, she was screaming in agony. Blood filled the water as fellow tourists rushed to pull her to safety. Her injuries were so brutal that doctors considered amputating her leg, though they managed to save it. Now here's where things get weird. When the woman regained consciousness, she insisted it wasn't a shark. She never saw the creature, but said it felt like being hit by jagged living rock. Not the rough, but rubbery skin of a shark. Her hands were covered in cuts from grabbing at something sharp and scaled, like the armored hide of a crocodile. The medical team treating her agreed. The bite pattern and the brutal tears in her flesh were more consistent with a crocodile attack than a shark's. And as rare as it is, crocodiles can end up in the ocean, especially during rainy seasons or after storms. There's even a species in that region called Morales crocodiles that have adapted to saltwater living. They're smaller than their freshwater cousins, but they're faster, stronger, and just as deadly. Now fast forward to December 14th. Despite the 2 earlier attacks, the beach wasn't closed. The latest victim was 75-year-old Belgian tourist Joseph Binance. It was late morning, and most beachgoers had already headed for shade, except for Joseph, who was enjoying a peaceful swim. Nearby on the shore, a family was filming their toddler playing at the water's edge. That's when Joseph suddenly cried out. He'd been bitten, hard, on the leg. The impact pulled him briefly underwater, but he managed to resurface, screaming for help. The moment was caught on camera. At first, people thought he was drowning, but as they ran toward the water, Joseph was yanked under again. This time, the ocean turned red. It was clear this wasn't just a swim gone wrong, it was a full-blown attack. As the rescuers approached, the creature let go and disappeared. Joseph was pulled to shore, but the damage was catastrophic. His right leg was nearly torn off, and tragically, it was too late. He'd lost so much blood that nothing could be done. The whole thing, from the first bite to the moment he was laid out on the sand, lasted under a minute. Joseph's death shook the community, especially since there's still no clear answer as to what killed him. The most likely culprit? A crocodile, over 3 meters long, lurking in salt water, something that doesn't usually happen but absolutely can. Sharks tend to return to hunting spots. Crocodiles? They move on. Whatever it was, it hasn't struck again, but it's still out there somewhere, silent, camouflaged, and waiting for its next victim. In May 2005, Natalee Holloway, an 18-year-old honors student from Alabama, boarded a plane to Aruba with her high school classmates for what was meant to be a celebratory graduation trip filled with sun, surf, and a last hurrah before college. But what started as an exciting vacation quickly turned into one of the most baffling and heartbreaking missing person cases in modern memory. On the night of May 30th, Natalee was last seen leaving a popular nightclub called Carlos and Charlie's with 3 local young men. Joran van der Sloot, a 17-year-old Dutch student living in Aruba, and 2 brothers, Deepak and Satish Kalpo. It was supposed to be just another night of fun, but Natalee never returned to her hotel. The next morning, when her classmates prepared to fly home, Natalee was nowhere to be found. Her packed suitcase remained untouched, her passport still in the room, and no one had heard from her. That was when the nightmare began. The disappearance triggered a massive search effort across the island. Volunteers, locals, and even the FBI scoured beaches, drained ponds, and combed through every possible lead. The story captured international attention, especially in the United States, as media outlets covered the case around the clock. Suspicion quickly centered on the last 3 people to see her, Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpo brothers. They were arrested, questioned, and released more than once. Their stories changed repeatedly, shifting from saying they dropped her off at the hotel to saying they went to the beach to saying they did not know. Despite mounting suspicion, there was no physical evidence, no body, and no confession, only conflicting stories and a community desperate for answers. As the months dragged on and the media frenzy continued, Natalee's family, especially her mother Beth Holloway, became tireless advocates in the search for truth. Beth traveled back and forth to Aruba, pushing for justice, appearing on television, and confronting suspects face-to-face. Her determination kept the case alive, but answers remained elusive. Over time, public attention faded, and the case went cold until another horrific event reignited interest in the man long suspected to be behind Natalee's disappearance. In 2010, 5 years after Natalee vanished, Joran van der Sloot was arrested again, but this time in Peru. He was charged with the brutal murder of a 21-year-old woman named Stephanie Flores, whom he killed in a hotel room just days after meeting her. The crime was shockingly similar in nature and timing, as it occurred exactly 5 years to the day after Natalee's disappearance. This time, there was evidence, a confession, and a conviction. Van der Sloot was sentenced to 28 years in prison in Peru, solidifying suspicions that he had likely been guilty all along in Natalee's case as well. But the final twist did not come until 2023, 18 years after Natalee was last seen alive, as part of a plea deal in a separate extortion case, where he had previously tried to scam Beth Holloway out of a large sum of money for false information about Natalee's remains. Van der Sloot finally confessed to her murder. He admitted that after she rejected his advances on the beach, he violently attacked her with a cinder block and pushed her body into the ocean. His chilling confession, though too late for a conviction in Aruba, brought long-awaited closure to a case that haunted a family and a nation for nearly 2 decades. Natalee Holloway's body was never found, but the truth, though buried for years, eventually surfaced and offered justice, even if delayed. At the Gondwana Game Reserve in South Africa, where luxury meets lion roars and elephant selfies are practically a rite of passage, tragedy and wild unpredictability collided in the most dramatic and heartbreakingly real way. FC Conradi, the 39-year-old co-owner, CEO, and unofficial elephant whisperer of the place, met his end not at the hands of poachers or corporate drama, but under the massive feet of one of the very animals he adored. You read that right? Trampled by an elephant. Not in some wild action movie chase scene, but during a seemingly routine morning stroll to gently nudge a herd of elephants away from the posh tourist lodges. You know, just another day at the safari office. Except this time it wasn't. Around 8 a.m. on July 22nd, 2025, as FC tried to move the herd, probably with his signature calm voice and I got this energy, one particularly moody 6-ton bull elephant decided it wasn't in the mood for polite direction. With no warning, it charged. We are talking tusks, feet, full elephant fury, and just like that, the reserve's beloved CEO, a man with degrees in zoology and business, was tragically gone before the morning coffee even kicked in. Rangers on site couldn't do a thing. By the time help arrived, FC had already suffered fatal injuries. It was a shocking blow, not just to the reserve, but to the world of wildlife conservation. This guy wasn't just some rich dude playing safari. He was genuinely passionate about wildlife, conservation, and running one of the swankiest game reserves in the country. The Gondwana team was shattered, releasing a tearjerker tribute that begged the public to let the man's legacy speak louder than the inevitable online rumors and wild theories. What makes this even more mind-boggling is that this wasn't even the first time the elephants at Gondwana had beef with the staff. In March 2024, David Candela, a 36-year-old field guide, was also killed by an elephant while leading a group near the reserve's eco-tent lodge. Same reserve, similar circumstances, eerily familiar outcome. Are the elephants organizing some kind of union or revenge arc? No one knows. But suddenly, those peaceful sunrise game drives feel a lot more like episodes of When Nature Attacks. Despite all this, the reserve's management is taking a chill approach. The elephant involved hasn't shown any unusual behavior, so they're keeping him in the reserve for now, monitoring his mood and maybe playing him some calming music or something equally soothing. But the decision not to remove the animal has sparked debates. Was this a freak accident or a predictable tragedy? Should wild animals in conservation parks be treated with kid gloves, or should there be consequences? Meanwhile, visitors are still rolling in, clutching their binoculars a little tighter and double-checking that no elephant is eyeballing them like they just stepped into a scene from Jurassic Park Savannah Edition. FC's story is a potent reminder of the wild in wildlife. These aren't oversized pets. They're 6-ton powerhouses with moods, instincts, and zero chill when provoked. Safaris and close encounters with nature's giants, the truth is that the wild doesn't read the script. One moment it's majestic, next moment it's deadly. So here's to FC Conradi, a man who lived and died by the wild. He wasn't just leading a game reserve, he was part of its rhythm, its danger, its beauty. His death is a sobering chapter in the safari tale book, a reminder that behind every magical elephant photo is a powerful creature that doesn't always play nice. David Jewell was a man of many talents, an entrepreneur, a community leader, and an adrenaline junkie with a deep love for kite surfing. Born in Australia, he later moved to Switzerland, where he spent over a decade building a successful life. He owned multiple eateries in the scenic ski town of Villars-Grillon, including a restaurant, gourmet burger bar, cafe, and deli. His mission was simple: bring the vibrant flavors of Australia to the snowy Swiss Alps. Over the years, David had built a reputation not just as a business owner, but as a trusted member of the local community. People described him as dependable, kind, and always willing to lend a helping hand. But in 2016, David took a well-earned break from his busy life and booked a holiday that promised sun, sea, and adventure. He joined a kite surfing expedition with Offshore Odyssey, a tour operator that specialized in reef-side adventures. The trip was set around New Caledonia, a tropical island territory east of Australia, famous for its rich marine life and secluded beauty. David was excited to spend several days kite surfing over crystal clear waters, surrounded by coral reefs and remote beaches. On one of the first days of the trip, the group anchored their catamaran near the reefs of the northern coast. The sun was shining, the winds were perfect, and the water was glassy. David strapped into his gear and set off across the ocean surface, wind pulling him into long, smooth glides. It was everything he had hoped for, pure freedom, pure joy. But below the serene surface, danger was lurking. A tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge, searching for prey. These apex predators are common in the region and can grow to over 11 feet in length. As David skimmed along the water, the shark sensed vibrations from his board. Driven by instinct, it moved in closer. When David launched into the air for another trick, he lost control during the landing and crashed into the sea. His kite lines went slack and the kite collapsed into the water. He was now floating, vulnerable. Moments later, the tiger shark struck. It surged upward and clamped its massive jaws around David's right thigh. Witnesses on the catamaran saw the telltale shape of the shark breaching the water, followed by a violent struggle and frothing waves. David screamed, blood pouring into the sea as the shark's serrated teeth tore through flesh and muscle. It released him seconds later and vanished back into the deep. The crew raced to his rescue, pulling David from the water and trying desperately to stop the bleeding. A distress call went out at 3:48 p.m. and help arrived quickly, but David was fading fast. He went into cardiac arrest en route to shore and was pronounced dead just after 5 p.m. He was only 50 years old. David's death was a devastating blow, not just to his family and friends, but to the tight-knit kiteboarding community. It also reignited debate over shark attacks in New Caledonia, which had seen multiple fatal incidents in recent years. Officials eventually closed some beaches and installed controversial underwater nets, measures that sparked backlash from marine biologists and indigenous Kanak leaders alike. For David, a man who embraced life to the fullest, the ocean was a playground. But in the end, it became the setting for a shocking and brutal encounter, his terrifying final affliction. Gabby Petito's story started like something straight out of a millennial travel vlog. A young couple, a white van, and the open road. Gabby, a 22-year-old aspiring travel influencer, and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, set off in July 2021 to document their cross-country road trip through the lens of van life. They shared pictures of sweeping landscapes, national parks, and smiling selfies. Everything seemed picture-perfect. But as the internet would soon learn, Instagram rarely shows the full story. As the couple journeyed westward, cracks began to show. In August, police in Moab, Utah were called after a bystander saw them arguing. Officers' body cam footage later revealed a tearful Gabby and a scratched-up Brian, with Gabby visibly distressed. The incident was labeled as a mental health crisis and no charges were filed, but looking back, it was a chilling moment that hinted at something much deeper. Fast forward to early September. Brian returned home to Florida, alone, no Gabby, no explanation. Just a silent man back at his parents' house while Gabby's family anxiously waited for any word from her. When they hadn't heard from her in days, they reported her missing on September 11th, 2021, and the mystery exploded into national headlines. Where was Gabby? Why wasn't Brian talking? Why was he lawyering up and refusing to help? Social media detectives sprang into action, picking apart every post, every video, every detail of their trip. Meanwhile, the Laundrie family kept their lips sealed, fueling public suspicion. Then, on September 19th, the worst was confirmed. Gabby's remains were found in Grand Teton National Park, Wyoming. She had been strangled to death, and the coroner estimated she had died around late August. The heartbreak was immense. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a homicide. And Brian? He'd vanished into thin air just days before Gabby's body was discovered. A full-on manhunt began, stretching across swamps, trails, and forests in Florida. For weeks, nothing. Just theories, sightings, and a growing sense of frustration. Then, on October 20th, skeletal remains were found in a nature preserve near Brian's home, along with a dry bag that held a notebook. DNA confirmed it was Brian, and the notebook contained what authorities called a written confession. He admitted to killing Gabby. The case, in a legal sense, was closed, but emotionally, far from it. The nation had become deeply invested, not just in the mystery, but in the heartbreak of Gabby's family and the signs that were missed along the way. The story sparked bigger conversations about domestic violence, toxic relationships, and how often victims are overlooked even when signs are right in front of us. It also brought up serious discussions about media bias and why some missing people get national attention while others do not. The term missing white woman syndrome re-entered the conversation, highlighting the disparity in coverage depending on race, gender, and socioeconomic status. Gabby's legacy, however, didn't end with the tragedy. Her family started the Gabby Petito Foundation, dedicated to helping other families of missing persons and raising awareness for domestic violence. Her name became a symbol, not of van life romance, but of how quickly something that looks perfect can turn deadly behind closed doors. It reminded the world to look closer, ask harder questions, and speak up when something feels wrong. Gabby Petito wasn't just another headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a creative spirit with a bright future. And her story, as heartbreaking as it is, lit a fire that continues to push for justice, awareness, and change. In the summer of 2002, Prague Zoo became the site of a grim and cautionary tale when 35-year-old Joseph Dominik made a decision that would cost him his life. Late one night, after the zoo had closed its gates to the public and the animals had settled into their nighttime routines, Dominik managed to breach the secure perimeter of the tiger enclosure. According to reports at the time, he had been drinking, and though the exact motivation remains unknown, he allegedly wanted to pet the tigers, a baffling and fatal miscalculation. Climbing over the safety barriers and fences that clearly marked the restricted area, he entered a space occupied by one of nature's most powerful predators. Tigers are not just big striped cats, they are apex hunters, territorial by nature and not remotely domesticated. When Dominik stepped into their enclosure, the animals reacted as any wild tiger might. They saw an intruder, not a visitor. What followed was as tragic as it was preventable. His body was discovered the next morning, mauled and lifeless, the scene confirming what everyone feared. It was not a zoo error, not a security flaw, and certainly not a random accident. This was a direct consequence of ignoring clearly posted warnings and common sense. The zoo, understandably, was shaken. Not only did the incident spark public alarm, but it also raised the dreaded question of whether the tiger or tigers should be euthanized. Thankfully, authorities and zoo officials agreed that the animals had done nothing wrong. They were simply reacting on instinct, protecting their territory from what they perceived as a threat. No disciplinary action was taken against the animals. The enclosure had been secure, the signage was in place, and the zoo had followed every safety regulation required. The truth was hard to escape. This was not a case of animal aggression, but human recklessness. The tragedy served as a painful reminder that wild animals, no matter how long they've lived in captivity, are still wild. They are not pets, not playthings, and certainly not creatures to be approached in their own space for thrill or curiosity. In the days that followed, the story made headlines across Europe. Some mourned the loss, others debated how such an incident could even happen in a modern zoo. And while public opinion was split, some blaming the zoo, others blaming the man, it was clear to most observers that this was a sobering example of what happens when boundaries between humans and wild animals are ignored. Joseph Dominik's death wasn't just a tragic event, it became a stark warning etched into the history of the Prague Zoo. And while it would be easy to paint this as a bizarre or even foolish decision made under the influence, the more important takeaway lies in respecting nature's boundaries. Zoos are places of education and conservation, but they are not playgrounds. The animals inside are not characters from cartoon or selfie props. They're living beings with instincts that don't switch off because a human walks in with good intentions. Ultimately, the Joseph Dominik case reminds us of the fragile line between fascination and danger. It's one thing to admire tigers from a safe distance, to marvel at their beauty and strength. It's another thing entirely to step into their domain uninvited. And unfortunately for Joseph, that distinction was learned too late. This next story is equal parts tragic, shocking, and if we're being honest, completely avoidable. Meet Prahlad Gujar, a 38-year-old maintenance worker from Rajasthan. A lovable guy with zero ambition and a whole lot of charm, Prahlad was the kind of dude who always chose parties over responsibilities. Everyone knew him as the fun guy, the life of every get-together, and that's exactly what led to the worst decision of his life. In February 2024, Prahlad was supposed to attend his niece's wedding down south. Instead, he lied to his family, claiming he couldn't get the time off work. The truth? He did get the week off. He just didn't feel like dealing with a week of awkward family small talk and ceremonies. So he spent that time partying non-stop with his buddies. For 5 straight days, they drank, wandered around local hangouts, crashed wherever they could, and basically relived their college years. But by Saturday morning, Prahlad was the last man standing. His friends had all tapped out, hungover, or passed out. Not ready to stop the party, he went bar-hopping solo, building a solid buzz before lunch. At some point, he made his way to the Sri Venetasara Zoological Park, a family-friendly zoo known for keeping intoxicated visitors out. Somehow, the ticket booth worker didn't clock his drunken state, and Prahlad slipped through the gates without issue. At first, he wandered the usual paths, unimpressed by the monkeys and deer. Then he moved on to the predators. Still bored, he decided to snap a few selfies in front of the lion enclosure, and that's when security noticed something was off. A guard named Sanji, who dealt with his fair share of unruly visitors, knew trouble when he saw it. He warned Prahlad to back off from the fence, clearly marked with signs telling guests to stay at least 8 feet away. But Prahlad wasn't done. Just behind the main lion exhibit was a quieter off-limits area meant for new arrivals or sick animals, a place clearly marked as restricted. Prahlad waited for the guard to get distracted, then darted down the path. He climbed a water tank overlooking the holding area, and below him, a massive male lion and 2 lionesses. With a drunken laugh and his phone raised high, Prahlad jumped. Yes, jumped 12 feet straight into the enclosure. The lions were startled at first, especially the male who snapped instinctively at Prahlad's shoulder. It wasn't a full bite, but it was enough to make Prahlad panic. Screaming in pain, he tried to run, even making it to a nearby tree, but he didn't get far. The lion caught him by the ankle and dragged him back like a rag doll. Prahlad didn't stand a chance. The lion pounced again, this time biting down on his neck. The break was instant. Death came before suffocation or blood loss. What's even more unsettling, the lions didn't eat him. They just played with him. For 2 hours, zookeepers watched in horror as the lions pawed at his body like it was a toy, scattering his remains across the enclosure. When staff finally lured the lions away with food, the damage was brutal. The coroner had to collect fragments of Prahlad's body from an 8-foot radius. The zoo later confirmed that the lion wasn't unusually aggressive, just doing what a predator does when something falls into its territory. The lion wasn't punished, just relocated for observation. In fact, zoo officials say he'll soon be returned to his main enclosure. Prahlad's death wasn't a tragedy of nature, it was a tragedy of human stupidity. And hopefully, no one else will be foolish enough to repeat his final, fatal mistake. Australia in the early 1990s was a backpacker's paradise. Imagine it. Cheap hostels, long open roads, stunning beaches, kangaroos bouncing around like they owned the place. It was practically calling out to young adventurers. Many travelers, especially from Europe, couldn't resist the lure. But beneath that sunny postcard exterior was a dark tale unfolding in the shadows of Belanglo State Forest, a quiet, eerie patch of wilderness about 90 minutes south of Sydney. Between 1989 and 1993, 7 young backpackers vanished without a trace. These weren't people who just ghosted their friends for a bit of soul-searching. Something sinister was going on. The victims included German tourists Gabor Neugebauer and Anja Habschied, British backpackers Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters, and Australian travelers Deborah Everest, James Gibson, and Simone Schmidl. Their remains were found dumped in the forest, often covered with sticks or arranged in bizarre ways. The condition of the bodies told a truly horrifying story. Most were bound, stabbed repeatedly, and some were even shot in the head execution style. Caroline Clark had been shot 10 times in the skull. Anja Habschied was decapitated, and her head was never found. The brutality wasn't random. It was systematic, sadistic, and terrifyingly personal. Police were stumped for a while. The forest was massive, and the bodies were discovered months, sometimes years after the murders. The case didn't break until a very lucky and very brave man named Paul Onions came forward. In 1990, Onions had been hitchhiking near the area when a man picked him up, chatted casually, then suddenly pulled a gun. Paul bolted out of the car, ran for his life, and flagged down another car for help. The guy he escaped was Ivan Milat, but at the time, no one realized how big that tip would be. Fast forward to 1994. After linking Paul's story with new forensic evidence, police raided Milat's home and hit the creepy jackpot. Inside were weapons matching those used in the murders, camping gear and clothes belonging to victims, and even souvenir-style items, like he was keeping trophies. Not exactly the decor you'd want in a guest room. Milat was arrested and put on trial in 1996. He claimed innocence the whole way through, but let's be honest, he didn't stand a chance. The evidence was rock solid. He was convicted of all 7 murders and sentenced to life in prison, never to be released. But here's the truly chilling part. Police believe there may have been more victims, ones they never found. Even his own family suspected he wasn't working alone. Some thought one or more of his brothers may have helped, but only Ivan went down for the crimes, and he kept his secrets locked up tight, right until he died in prison in 2019 from cancer. The backpacker murders shook Australia to its core. Suddenly, hitchhiking didn't seem so carefree, and the wide-open outback felt a lot less safe. Belanglo State Forest became infamous, practically a no-go zone unless you were into true crime tourism. The case led to tighter missing person protocols, improved forensic databases, and a whole lot of people second-guessing roadside rides. While the horror of what happened can't be undone, the strength of survivors like Paul Onions and the relentless determination of investigators brought some measure of justice. And Ivan Milat left behind a legacy no one's proud of, and a forest that will forever carry the echoes of his terrible crimes.